Hey guys, what's up? It is Ripe again, back with a mix of Neighbors from Hell and r/revenge stories. If you are new to my channel, please feel free to subscribe to join our awesome community, and without any further ado, let's dive right into the stories. And the first one is titled, Am I the a-hole for taking property back that is mine? I am 41 male in San Jose in California. About 3 months ago I loaned an old lawnmower of mine to my neighbor. It was an old snapper riding lawnmower. He was supposed to have used it for one time, but it started raining while he was mowing and he stowed it in his shed to keep it from being rained on. About 2 months go by and I hadn't said anything about it because we work different hours, so he is not home when I am there and it is just an old mower I had. Well, then his son and my daughter, they are 17 and 16 respectively, were caught by him having intercourse in his son's bedroom. They have been friends as long as we have been neighbors, which is about 10 years. This leads Mike, my neighbor, coming to my house and demanding that I reprimand my daughter for having intercourse with his son. I was astounded. First of all, his son was taking a part in the act as much as she was, and she later admitted to me that she wasn't forced and they had intercourse several times before. I would also like to add that Mike and I hadn't ever crossed a word up until now, and even though he's a very religious person and sometimes I purposely ignored him when he would bust my balls about alcohol consumption or MJ use. Anyways, I ended up threatening to call the cops if he didn't leave, and he eventually did. A few days go by and I think maybe things cooled off, so I message Mike and ask him for my mower back. He responded and told me to F off and that he didn't have my mower. It was a lie because it's been in his shed all summer. Realizing I have no claim to the mower, no service records or proof of ownership, I made a plan to regain the mower myself. I would wait until Mike went to work one day and break into his shed and get my mower back. I took some bolt cutters and cut the lock off of the shed. It was chain locked. I recorded the entire thing on my cell phone from start to finish to prove that I was just getting my property. He comes home on lunch during this and ends up calling the police on me. I managed to get the mower back to my property, but he caught me in the act. The police arrested me for criminal trespassing and breaking and entering. Am I the a-hole here? Seriously, I just wanted my mower back, and since he couldn't accept that his child was just as involved in my daughter's act as he was, he also called my child a bad word to my face. I was just going to let him have it until he acted like a complete jackass. I have contacted a lawyer and we have subpoenaed the mower manufacturer as I bought it brand new, and the plan is to now try and charge him with theft of my mower. And a user in the comments said, everyone sucks here, honestly there are levels you could have gone about this, but you hit the nuke button. And another user disagreed with that notion and said, not the a-hole, you don't need us to tell you what you did was wrong in the eyes of the law, you now have an arrest record to tell you that. What you need to know is whether you were righteous in your actions. And yes, you absolutely were. F that guy. So guys, I am curious, what do you think about this story? Who is actually the a-hole here, or does everybody simply suck? Let us know what you think in the comments. And the next one is a little pro-revenge story, and it is titled, My 2 bosses initiated a witch hunt to get rid of me. I told their boss's boss, the mayor. I would like to share a fairly recent story of how I was being discriminated against at my government job, and when seeking help from my superiors, they instead initiated a witch hunt to get rid of me. I would spoil the ending right away and say that to my knowledge my bosses did not lose their job or face any personal consequences other than suffering a huge embarrassment. However, after being dragged through the mud, they were forced to sign a deal that they were not very happy with. I wish I could say they got fired and their gross incompetence displayed in the papers for everyone to see, but reality is often disappointing. I worked a government job in a town hall for a couple of years. I am gay, and that became an issue at my workplace very early on due to what my boss and HR would later describe in writing as a rough work environment and blame me for being too sensitive. They said this because there was a lot of poking fun around the office, but also a good deal revolving around me and my sexuality. This was a daily mental strain for me, and I eventually told my boss about it. He, who is typically a passive boss that enables this kind of work culture, responded with a knee-jerk reaction and scolded several colleagues. This only resulted in me being alienated by my colleagues even more, and they soon gradually distanced themselves away from me. Doing my job became impossible because some colleagues wouldn't cooperate, didn't share vital information, leading me to make critical errors and being blamed for it by my boss. My boss knew about the situation and told me that others had told him that they didn't want to work with me because I wasn't good at my job, and that he, being back to his regular passive self, simply accepted their wishes. When I confronted him with the way he handled the situation, he made the excuse that this was a new situation for him, that the problem was not as bad as he thought and that he overreacted, but what is done is done. Since the gay jokes technically had stopped, he figured the problem had been resolved and that this was a whole other issue that I was trying to blame my colleagues for. Despite saying and putting in writing that we just have to accept that some colleagues don't want to work with me, it is entirely my fault for lacking knowledge on areas that are their responsibility. In cases where it was apparent that the colleague was at fault for not cooperating, the boss told me to best keep my distance and delegate the task to someone else they could work with. Sensing this could only go downhill, I had joined a union, and it was around this time I got them involved. After explaining the situation to a contract in the union, we had a meeting with a work relations woman who worked in the same building, and after hearing my story, she recommended that I file an internal complaint. I did, and that is when the workforce executioner entered the crap show. The complaint went to the HR manager. We have a new meeting, me, union lady, work relations lady, and HR manager. I explained the whole situation again. Everyone in the room was very supportive and understanding. So then the HR manager conducted her own internal investigation, where she basically just had a meeting with my boss and then another meeting with everyone excluding me, where she straight out asked if they think I'm the problem or their boss. She writes a report that in short says that my colleagues have said the workplace became worse after I joined the team, and that the scolding from my boss made things more difficult, though they unanimously agreed I'm the problem and cannot do my job. She also writes that every colleague must watch me closely and log every tiny mistake in the system, and finally that maybe I should look for another job. My side of the story, including documented conversations between me and my boss, is not mentioned in the report at all. The report is also signed by the backstabbing work relations woman who recommended I complain in the first place. The report is sent to me and my boss, but my boss also immediately forwarded the report to the entire department because, as he put it, they have a right to know the whole story, and totally not as a "we need to get rid of this guy." So now that HR, my boss, and the work relations lady has worked hard to completely obliterate the tiny reputation I had in the department, I call in sick the next day, get an appointment with my doctor, and I am off on sick leave. I talk to the union rep, who says this is clearly retaliation from the management, it is illegal and sadly far from the first time she has seen this. She explains that she will write a formal complaint to the HR manager and demand an apology, or else they will take further action. I have honestly run out of patience at this point, and it seems no matter how bad it gets, it's still not bad enough for the union to take any real action. So this is when I finally wise up a little bit and decide to not be a pawn that just reacted to their bureaucratic theater and actually act for myself. I know I don't want to stay on sick leave, nor do I ever want to go back working for those psychopaths, so with nothing of value to lose, I figure I make my exit with a Hail Mary. I let the union rep write her complaint, which is very formal and direct. It describes the investigation presented in the report as very weak and that actions were done by the management that are legally and morally questionable. I get a copy of the complaint from the union rather than wait for HR to respond to the complaint. I write my own internal email explaining my situation, attach the complaint and other damning documents, and send it directly to the mayor. I ask for his help, though there is also the implication that he is the only thing standing between the city and a lawsuit from hell. Early the next morning, I get a response. The mayor is appalled by my email and assures me that he will take the matter directly to the city director and together they will decide what to do. Soon after, they launch a new investigation. This time it's an external investigation led by a lawyer they regularly hire. The lawyer puts together a committee consisting of him, a woman from another union and the director's assistant, so not entirely an external investigation. They look over all the documents I sent the mayor and have separate interviews with me, accompanied by a union rep, my boss, the HR manager and a colleague that has to denounce that he's a homophobe, as if being diagnosed with homophobia is the only way his behavior is considered discriminatory. After a few weeks, they give their report, which is sent to the director, the mayor and me. It is a very carefully formulated report. Sadly, it concludes that the leadership has done what can be expected, though right after, in stark contrast, it says, "All decisions made by the leadership in their original report must stop immediately." Despite the anticlimactic report from a lawyer, my union rep believes it is still in our favor, and even though it doesn't say it outright, there is an insinuation of guilt written between the lines. I don't hear from the mayor or the director again. Instead, I am called to another meeting with my boss and the HR manager to discuss the report. I bring my contact from the union with me, who has explained to me that she is prepared to negotiate terms for my resignation. We go to the meeting. The report is on the table in front of them. They seem to have developed tunnel vision, as they are only interested in addressing the one part that says, "Leadership has done what can be expected." Though bizarrely, I still get a forced apology from the HR manager about how poorly she managed the investigation and yet still stands by it somehow. They talk as if they are on a different planet, not admitting to any fault despite just apologizing and having a report in their hands from a lawyer that says to stop what they are doing immediately. HR manager proceeds to put her on compassionate act, says this is not good for my mental health and they are open to solutions, but it is probably in my best interest to resign. The director has authorized them to give me the generous deal of a 6-month salary after my resignation. The deal, however, is far from good enough, and thankfully my contact in the union is a tough negotiator. I barely have to say anything while the negotiation goes on for another hour, and the two bosses slowly get more and more frustrated until finally they give in. They agree to pay a monthly salary after my resignation, which roughly amounts to $40,000 total, in addition to $2,000 as a symbolic gesture for damages, which is a formal admission of guilt. My boss also has to write a recommendation letter which has to be approved by me. Finally, they want to include in the signed agreement that the legal conflict between me and them is hereby concluded and that I cannot sue them over this in the future. I sign the agreement and I am officially happily unemployed. Forward a couple of months to now, I am currently studying for a bachelor's degree, still living off of the money I won. I don't have to worry about income for a good while longer and will likely apply for an interest-free student loan when I am poor enough to qualify. I still think about what happened and I often wonder what would have happened had I taken the whole city to court. I'm sometimes tempted to hire a lawyer to test if the agreement actually stops me from filing a suit or not. I feel like even though I was compensated, I lost my crappy job while the people responsible kept theirs. They can go on pretending they did nothing wrong while sweeping all their ugliness under the rug. The city will never run out of money and will simply pay to get out of the next inevitable blunder. On the other hand, my job was not really a loss, to say it mildly, and I am glad I didn't have to go through a long and stressful lawsuit. But as long as my story remains ignored, my sense of retribution is not really satisfied. Though maybe it never can be either way. I wish I could show people how bad it really is behind closed doors in City Hall and the pigs they allow to reside within. I also don't want my name associated if the story got out. I got a pile of confidential documents that reveal their true ugly faces but cannot share them due to an NDA. I did however go as far as to go forward documents and a complaint to a governmental labor authority, though I have no idea if anything came of it. If you made it all the way through, I thank you for reading and would love to read your thoughts and maybe similar experiences. I just want to also emphasize that my life and mental health has improved tremendously since I left that building for the very last time, and that I am lucky to have my partner, friends and family who supported me all the way through this hell. Lastly, to anyone who might read this and feel like they are in a similar situation, don't wait for it to get better, just look for another job and get out of there ASAP. Don't let it devolve into what I went through. Send a complaint if you want to, but make sure you leave soon afterwards. And never trust anyone in the workplace just because they act sympathetic. They are not on your side unless you are directly paying them to support you. And Ripe Stars, I would love to hear what you think about this story. Do you think that OP got the revenge that he deserved, or should he have gone even further? I have to say, I really feel bad for OP that he had to go through such a terrible workplace situation, and I really hope that the next workplace he finds will be much more accommodating than this one. And sadly, I would definitely agree, if you are in a similar situation when pretty much all of the co-workers are against you and even the boss is a douchebag, there is not that much you can do. The best choice probably in most cases is simply to look for another job, which is obviously not as simple as it sounds. And the last one is titled, Nebraska, I just closed on a new house. Sellers allege that I owe a portion of their $990 security system cancellation fee because I did not take over their contract, threatening small claims court. I closed on the 14th. Sellers are alleging that the security system goes with the house and so does the security system contract. The disclosure states security system stays but does not mention the $50 per month contract with 4 years remaining. I was never made aware of any of this information until after closing, when the seller contacted me via an abrasive and frankly unhinged email. By looking me and my fiance's emails up via social media, I assume this is the only personal info I have available on social media. By the way guys, just a quick tip, really bad idea, you should never publicly show your emails on social media. We promptly blocked her without replying and notified our agent and the seller's agent that she was threatening to take us to small claims court if we did not pay $990 for not taking over the security system contract. Our agent advised not to respond and to get our personal security system we brought with us from old house installed as soon as possible and to change all locks. The seller's agent says this is a miscommunication on all parts and says we should all 4 parties split the bill, roughly $250 each. I have bought houses before that had a security system installed and never even considered taking over the seller's contract. This discussion never occurred prior to closing. The sellers assumed we would proactively call their company and get it switched over. I trust that if my realtor was aware prior to closing, she would have informed me. Per the last correspondence with the seller's agent, if my agent and I do not each contribute $250, they have all of the paperwork together to take us to small claims court. The response deadline is Monday, September 24th. I apologize if neglected any relevant information. I am typing this intermittently while at work. I deeply appreciate any insight. If the sellers have a valid claim against us, thank you. Edit/update, our realtor made it clear we were not going to respond. She received an email stating the sellers have filed to take us to small claims for the $990 contract fee, her travel expenses to get to court costs and all wages lost from her having to take us to court. She approximates this as $1,350 total. After reading through your excellent replies, this is mostly just a major inconvenience at this point. And a user in the comments said, unless something in your closing document stated that you will be taking over the security contract, then I would suggest they can piss right off. If sued, respond. And another person said, nope, typically those contracts can be transferred by the seller to the new seller's residence for a fee. assuming the provider offers coverage in the area where the seller moved. Otherwise, this is no different than if the seller had gotten a telephone line or TV cable under a 1-year contract and moved before the expiration of the term. Unless you expressly agree to assume the contract from the seller, then you are not liable. Update to the Nebraska story. Thank you to all of the people who commented on the original thread. This was my first time dealing with small claims court, and all of the helpful advice and information really helped set me up for success. So, short story is that the sellers didn't end up taking me to court for roughly $1,400. This was for the total cost of the contract, buyout for their security system, travel expenses since they moved out of state and would need to pay for gas and lodging to come back to sue us, as well as court costs. Small claims court was surprisingly straightforward and informal. I've never been a big talker, but I honestly don't think I was able to say more than 3 words at a time without the plaintiff interrupting me. The judge eventually asked her to please stand in the hallway so I could speak my side fully. She absolutely refused to leave, but did stay quiet for a short minute, so I could say that I never agreed to take over her security contract, and there was no documentation to suggest that I did. The judge agreed and ended up ruling in my favor. I thought it was done there, but the plaintiff swiftly appealed the decision, so now we had a new court date early this month with a different judge. During this time, the plaintiff continues to send me hostile emails and voice messages. The seller's broker, their realtor's boss, called me while I was at work to tell me he was very displeased. I filed a formal complaint against his realtor. He told me I was not welcome to pursue any future business with his company, and I assured him the feeling was mutual. The broker said he supports all of his realtors and will not be acting on the complaint in any way. So I went and talked to the major's office about the situation. The major asked me what I wanted out of this, and I showed him the hostile emails from the seller and told him I felt it was the realtor's job to act as an in-between even after the sale was complete. The mayor said he would step in and speak with the broker. This is a fairly small town, they probably already knew each other. I never heard from the seller again after that, thanks mayor. So now it comes time for round 2 in small claims court. The new judge goes through and reads the write-up from round 1 and asks the plaintiff if there's new evidence or information that has not been covered. Long story short, there was not. The judge ended up sustaining the previous ruling in my favor and strongly advised the plaintiff not to appeal unless there is new evidence or information that has not been seen by the court. It's been 5 days and no word on an appeal, so I think it is safe to say that I'm finally done and ready to put this whole ugly thing behind me. Once again, thank you to all of you who helped me on the original thread. I'm very pleased that resources like this community exist. On a final note, gossip, but I got a call from the mayor at 2 AM the night before last because there was a house fire down the street from me. The mayor and I know each other well, so I went to go help the volunteer fire brigade put it out. We got it under control and we were winding down when a deputy from the sheriff's office comes to tell me that the lady who sued me waited around the court building the day of the appeal for the judge to get off and then tried to confront him about the ruling in the courthouse parking lot. I did not really care to hear about it, but it sounds like she's in some pretty deep trouble now. Kind of cathartic. Edit, thank you for all of the very kind and thoughtful messages. To clarify some common questions, the ruling stipulated that the plaintiffs pay all court costs, including my own. Yes, I could probably countersue, but I'm very interested in dealing with the seller and broker as little as possible for the rest of my life. Please don't take this post as a representation of Nebraska. Most people here are actually quite nice. There's a couple rotten apples in every bunch. And guys, unfortunately, we have already reached the end of the video. However, this is not the end of ripe content for you. I would highly suggest to check out my endless binge watch playlist, which will hopefully soon show up on the left corner of the screen, which will provide you with hundreds, if not thousands of hours of ripe content. If you still haven't gotten enough, then please also check out my Patreon at patreon.com/ripeyoutube for more than 50 exclusive Reddit videos that you will only find on there. Furthermore, if you want to share your own story with our community, then please head on over to r/ripestories on Reddit, where you can share your own stories and there is a good chance that I might read it in a video. Thank you so much for your daily support and I hope to see you again tomorrow.